to our speakers today. Uh, Penulis listener, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for your attendance today. We feel grateful to Allah for allowing us to gather today to have our 36 book sessions organized by ILMI, even though after Raya. So today, our book session is on a book named A Guide for the Perplexed, which is written by Schumacher. So, today we will delve into the idea of Schumacher. He actually critiques on the materialistic approach of modern science. So he actually tried to contradict between science for manipulation and also science for understanding, which will be further elaborated by our speakers today. It also argued that our human experience is much more broader and complex, which cannot be explained merely by our modern science today. So, without further ado, I will pass the floor to Hilman Azman for the book session, inshallah.
Thank you very much. Alhamdulillah, wa nista'inu wa sallallahu alaihi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wa ya rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Thank you very much. And today we jadi hari ini dalam sesi bedah buku pada petang ini, buku yang telah dipilih adalah A Guide for the Perplexed, atau panduan pada mereka yang tersesat atau keliru. Tajuk yang sama turut diberikan oleh Musa bin Maimun atau Maimonides pada karyanya ahli falsafah Yahudi abad ke-13. Namun A Guide for the Perplexed oleh E.F. Schumacher ini merupakan suatu karya yang pada beliau cuba untuk membentangkan satu peta baru kepada manusia moden. Apa fungsi peta? Kita menggunakan peta untuk membimbing kita menuju ke destinasi. Tetapi menurut penulis, kadang-kadang peta itu tidak menyertakan perkara-perkara yang penting sehingga kita terlepas pandang. Misalnya, katakan kalau kita ingin mengembara di Switzerland, tetapi di dalam peta yang kita terima tidak menyatakan mengenai misalnya bukit bukau ataupun tasik-tasik atau di mana stesen kereta api atau di mana tempat-tempat bersejarah. Justru kita mungkin akan terlepas pandang. Dan peta yang kita terima itu kita harus lihat sama ada mereka yang mengarang peta itu menyertakan semuanya atau mereka mempunyai kepentingan sehingga menyisihkan beberapa perkara atas kepentingan mereka atau bias mereka dan memberikan kepada kita peta yang tidak sempurna. Apa contohnya? Misalnya beliau sebut peta yang pernah diberikan oleh René Descartes, ahli falsafah Perancis abad ke-16 kepada manusia moden. Peta yang disebut sebagai meditations atau discourse on method yang berasas kepada rasionalisme, faham akliyah yang meminggirkan elemen utama di dalam peta itu, iaitulah pandangan sarwa empirisisme atau sumber pengetahuan berdasarkan panca indera. Jadi, di dalam peta yang telah dipersembahkan oleh Descartes kepada kita, maka jalan yang dibawa di dalam peta itu menuju kepada jalan yang hanya berteraskan kepada rasionalisme dan mengabaikan banyak elemen penting dalam empirisisme atau mengutamakan rasionalisme ke atas empirisisme, iaitu menggunakan panca indera dalam sebagai sumber pengetahuan, epistemologi, ataupun peta yang telah diberikan kepada kita oleh tokoh-tokoh empirikal yang lain di dalam peradaban Eropah yang hanya mengutamakan panca indera dan sains dan pemerhatian, tetapi meminggirkan aspek lain seperti rasionalisme dan kalau di dalam agama mengetepikan sama sekali peranan wahyu atau revelation. Jadi buku ini cuba ditawarkan sebagai suatu peta baharu, menggantikan peta-peta lama dalam menanggapi cara manusia hidup. Dan kita akan masuk dengan lebih detail selepas ini. Jadi kita dah faham serba-serbi tentang mengapa ini dinamakan sebagai a guide for the perplexed. Siapakah Ernest Friedrich Schumacher? Lahir di Empire Jerman pada tahun 1911 atau ada yang kata 1914. Ini sebelum zaman Perang Dunia Pertama. Dan beliau meninggal dunia di Switzerland pada usia 66 tahun. Apa kepercayaan beliau? Beliau seorang ateis pada asalnya, tetapi setelah pergaulan dan exposure, beliau akhirnya cenderung ke arah Buddhism. Dan justru itu kalau kita baca dalam Small is Beautiful, ada elemen-elemen Buddhism, terutama middle path dan empat jalan, dan juga beberapa elemen Buddhism yang begitu asing pada falsafah Barat.
In English, please.
Okay. And later on in the year 1950 until 1970, he served as the economic advisor in a coal company, of which, to his mind, we should prioritize coal over petroleum in our fuel industry, because fuel, according to him, is eventually going to evaporate, but coal is something which is in abundance, and therefore the need to shift from petroleum to coal. But if only he know of the carbon production from using coal, he would not suggest such a thing. And also, as someone who writes in Small is Beautiful about environmentalism, this is very unbecoming. But nonetheless, there is a logic in that, except that nowadays people try to debunk the theory that fossil fuel will eventually finish, because apparently there is no evidence on that, and apparently the term fossil fuel was coined to give the impression that these natural resources is very limited because it's based on fossil. But in fact, it's not based on fossil. It's not based on animals, remnants per se, but rather natural resources. And you can find it on the land and also on the sea, offshore and also onshore. So apparently, from atheist, he became Buddhist, especially during his travel to Burma in 1955, and his encounter with a few Christians, theologians, and he was amused with the idea of socio-economic justice in their writings, especially in Pope Leo, Pope John, Gilbert Chesterton, Hilaire Belloc, and others. And his Christian understanding is based on the philosophy of Thomism or Thomas Aquinas, a, a contemporary of Ibn Rushd and Maimonides in the Muslim Spain. Okay, now we'll start to go into this book, and I strongly suggest you to read this book because, to my mind, this book offers a new dimension of thought in understanding the world, not solely based on Western secular paradigm, but also based on spirituality, and there is a dimension of Eastern philosophy in this idea. Now we've talked about how this book tries to lay a map for the modern man. And according to him, this map will be more comprehensive than his predecessors. Of course, there is always the claim of any thinkers and philosophers. So what did he propose? Number one, he's proposing of a new understanding of the world. There are four elements, and number one is the world, and number two is a new understanding of the man, of humankind, and number three is about man's learning of the world, or shall we say, the mechanism to live in this world, and number four, the meaning to live in this world. So, world, humankind, ways to live, and the meaning of life. And according to him, this is the four great truths. Empat kebenaran utama. Empat kebenaran agung for modern humankind. Probably in a limited time that we have today, we will cover at least one, or the most probably two, the first two, and the rest will be covered in the upcoming session. Now, number one, he talked about the nature of this world. According to him, modern humankind is not confused with regards to the nature of what is man, what is animal, what is plants, and what are the inanimate beings. And this is because we tend to, the word is reduce. We tend to reduce everything to material, i.e., the pervasive influence of scientific materialism upon modern human being somehow influence them to reduce everything to matter that can be experimented and observed in this world using the senses, and also by the help or assistance from scientific instruments like telescope or microscope. But he says, because of this worldview, we confuse between human and animals and consider human beings as an extension of animals. So in this chapter of the world, he tries to explain that there are four grades of beings. And number one is the class of matter, of which he regarded as the minerals. And number two is the class of vegetables, plants, vegetations, of which they are of different kind from minerals. Number 3 is the class of animals, and they are of different kind from the 2 classes preceding them. And number 4 is the class of human beings. Though this is not the only classes that exist, but according to him, in this observable world, these are the 4 classes. Of course, it reminds you to probably Aristotelian's classification of beings, but there is a unique contribution of the author towards this theory. Now, what makes plants different from the minerals? According to him, all of these 4 classes, they all have matters. They have jirim, you can observe. But what makes plant different from matters is the fact that the plant has something that the minerals doesn't have, which according to him, this something we denote for now as the element X, because we do not know what it is. But there is something that makes plant different from minerals. So this X, if taken away from plant, it will become just like the minerals. And you cannot give this X to the minerals for it to become plant, because you simply cannot. This X becomes part of plant's identity, and after few reasoning and contemplation and experimentation, he come to conclude that this X is life. Because plants alive because of element X, which is life, which you cannot point physically in plants. Now this makes sense, right? Because you cannot take life from plant and put, say, in gold, and the gold becomes inanimate and grow. You cannot. You cannot simply put life in inanimate beings like soil or rock. But if you take away life from plant, then it will become just like the minerals. And then he went to the next stage, which is the animals. What does the animals have that the plants doesn't have? He says, animals, first of all, can move, yes, but does plant move? There are some plants that move. Or even in a flytrap or pitcher plant that can consume insects using the acid. Okay, but they are considered as plants. How does they differ from animals? According to Schumacher, it's because animals have something that he regards as motivation. Motivation in animals that makes them move around, and it pushes them to hunt, to jump for joy when they saw their master, for example, a dog, or to run in fear when they saw a predator. And this doesn't happen among plants. This only happens among animals because they have motivation. And this motivation, since we cannot really point to animal, in which organ you cannot point, therefore he named it as why. Okay. Right. Now comes the tricky part. How does humankind different from those of animals? humankind also have life. Humankind also have motivation. But how does humankind different from animals? If anyone could try to guess, how can you say humankind is different from animals? You see, this is also the questions raised among Muslim philosophers, even as in the early of 9th, 10th centuries. Al-Kindi questioned this, Ibn Sina questioned this, because they try to define what is the humankind. Some attempt to define humankind as a being that laughs, a laughter being, because they say there is no animal that can laugh. Is it true? That's not true. Is there animals that can laugh? Huh? Hyena? Like laughing.
Sounds like that.
Sounds like laughing, but probably it's just a natural sound that, you know, laughing as in there is also an emotion of joy and exuberance. So, yeah, some consider humankind as a laughing animals, and that's how it's different from other animals. Some would consider humankind as the one that walk with 2 feet, which is, of course, easily challenged, because there are so many animals that walk with 2 feet, even cats. I saw some videos. Cats with
Very funny. Two Tom.
two, yeah.
Tom and Jerry.
But
Tom and Jerry. Oh,
yeah. Okay. But then there's this one definition that prevalent throughout the ages, which is the one that defines humankind as a rational animal, or hayawan an-natiq. A rational animal that can speak and has language and can think logically, which is the definition of nutq, which is absent among other animals. Some would argue, even a parrots, even parrots can speak, can give salam, right? And can answer salam. But that does not mean it's speaking, it's parroting without really understanding the meaning of it. It's different from humankind. So this definition prevails. A rational animal. Although I would pose this question for you to think. How about, say, a child who lacks proper thinking? Can it be regarded as a rational animal? Or a person, crazy person, right? A crazy person who lost his sound mental capability, does it still considered as a rational soul, rational human, rational animal? Or probably someone's induced by medicine and in coma in hospital where the brain doesn't really functioning. So can you still regard the person as a rational animal? So that's probably a debate with regards to this definition of hayawanun natiq. But what does Schumacher has to say? He says, humankind has this element that he designates as Z or Z, which is the capacity of self-awareness. The capacity to be aware of his own existence. And this doesn't occur to animals. When you aware of your own existence, this is something of a potential rather than actual. It makes you aware of what you have and what you can do. Therefore, humankind is measured based on the progress or the best contribution that he can achieve in building civilization. Humankind is not measured based on the fastest, who is the fastest, who can run the fastest. Now it's, what was the name of the fastest runner? Usain Bolt. But if he's to run and compete with the cheetah, definitely lost terribly. Therefore, humankind is not measured based on that, but it was judged based on what it's capable to do. And this only comes from its own self-awareness. When it's aware that it's a thinking animal, reminds you of Descartes, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I exist. And by the thinking of itself and its potentiality, it can contribute and actualize something beyond our own imagination. Within 200 or 300 years, we have arrived to this point. 300 years back, we're still struggling in the Europe, still struggling with sanitation, with all sorts of diseases. But today, you already talk about how to install chips in humankind and all sorts of AI revolution, just within a very short period of time, incomparable to any species on this earth. So that's probably, according to Schumacher, is what defines man's distinct nature from other beings. So there you go, the 4 classes of beings, which, according to him, there are some rules in this. Rule number 1, there is simply no way for a being in one class to progress. The term that he used is progression. A being cannot simply progress from one class to another, which means a mineral cannot progress to become a plant. A plant cannot progress to become animal. And an animal cannot progress to become a human being. Because why? He says, if you can crack the code, how to install self-awareness to animals, then you can falsify this rule. If you can crack the code how to install consciousness into plant until it has consciousness like animals, then it means this rule is falsified. But so long you cannot do that, then it means a being cannot progress from one class to another.
So you reject evolution.
He rejects evolution.
Okay.
That's the implication of this rule. It means evolution is invalid if by evolution we strictly refers to a progression from ape to Homo sapiens. What are other rules? He also says you can take away, or probably in the formula, in the equation, x, y, z, and then for the matter we simply symbolize as m. In the equation, if you plus them all, m plus x plus y plus z, you got the humankind, you got the human being as the result. But if you take one, say you take z, you got the animal, which means if you take self-awareness from the humankind, they will descend in terms of status to become just like animals that is not aware of itself. But you cannot add self-awareness to animals until it becomes human. It's not the other way around. Same goes to animals. When you take away its consciousness and it's still alive, so it's just like a plant, which is in a life mode, but it cannot move or not even has the consciousness to move. Just like human being in a state of coma, where it's fully dependent upon medication and also medical assistance, oxygen and water to continue alive. But if taken away, then so these are the four classes or grades of beings that, according to Schumacher, is what define the world that we live in. And therefore, he stressed that even if we cannot identify and take consciousness or self-awareness or life from these beings and put in laboratory and you do experiment with it, even though you cannot do that, does not mean it does not exist. Now this is he's alluding to scientific materialism, which reduce everything only to matter. Because these things are immaterial. Okay. He has a very good analogy. He says, there is a mazhab in biology that assumes life is simply a combination of atoms. Okay? So he says, if we subscribe to this view, we are no different than those who consider that Shakespeare's Hamlet or Othello is simply a combination of letters. Shakespeare's works are, until today, is very widely recognized to be probably the peak of English language and literature. But if we consider this play, it's a Shakespeare's play, to be merely a combination of letters that produce Hamlet or Othello or Macbeth, then, we neglect the biggest significance of the play, of Shakespeare's play, which is the meaning behind each place and poetry and prose. Rather, it is the other way around. It is not the combination of atoms that make us a human being. Rather, we are composed of atoms. It is Shakespeare's Hamlets are composed of letters, not the letters made up the prose and beautiful masterpiece of literature. But beware, it is not to reject, like what our moderator said in the beginning. It is not to reject science per se, but rather to put science in its proper place, which is science, chemistry, and biology are only capable of observing the observable universe, and therefore we should not reduce world only to this science, because there are other realities that are imperceivable by the telescope and microscope, including life, consciousness. Okay. So we talk about progression, we talk about the different classes of beings, And according to the author as well, so we go to the class of plants. For example, plants, if you put it in a certain direction of the sunlight, the roots will grow stronger to ensure that the plants have capture enough sunlight for its own photosynthesis process. And if you change it to, other direction, the roots will support the plants to follow the direction of the sunlight. And this in science is what we call as stimulus. It's a stimulus that is imposing the plant to move according to the stimulus. In other words, the plant doesn't have its own will to determine where it wants to go. It's completely depending on the stimulus. Animals have something which we regard as motivations. It will be motivated to eat if it's hungry. It will predate among smaller insects or animals based on its capacity as an animal. It has the quwwah, the strength, and also the motivation to do that. And also the instinct, right, to reproduce. But humankind, human being, they have this one particular distinct characteristic which we regard as Z just now, which is self-awareness, that is capable of doing something regardless of stimulus and regardless of motivation. I.e., human being has what we call today as free will to do something even though he doesn't want it, or he was not forced to do it. For example, during Ramadan, you fast. If you are following your animal soul, we say just now, if we are hungry, we will eat. Animal, if it's hungry, then it will eat. But the fact that you can restrain yourself from eating during Ramadan, when in fact you're very hungry, means that you have something more than animal, which is the will, the free will, free to act according to what you want. And the more we are not succumb to natural causes around us, the freer we are. And of course, Schumacher is referring to the freest being of all, which is not caused and which is not influenced by anything, which is God himself. He can act according to his will, even though to the humankind, to the human judgment, he will not act that way. For example, according to Mu'tazil, of course, Schumacher doesn't mention this. God will punish those who sin and will never put to hellfire those who do righteousness. But according to Ash'ari Creed, God is able to punish even the most righteous person on earth. Not because he's unjust, but because he's, number one, our morality or our judgment is limited. We have A and B. We have mathematics in our logics. That's number one. Number two, he is basically can do whatever he wants. He is not tied to any particular ruling or law that we assume to be the law of the universe. In fact, he determined his own law. And therefore, it is not impossible for God to punish the most righteous person on earth. This is according to Ash'ari Creed, in comparison or in stark difference to Mu'tazili. And why do I touch upon this? Is to allude to what we discussed just now. To say that in the context of humankind, the more we are free to determine our own decision regarding or without being influenced much by natural cause, the more freer we are. And of course, have to mention the caveat that in the context of humankind, we are also bound by certain laws, of course, according to levels. If you are a socialized person, then you are bound to a more societal laws, to the norms, to everything. But if you are more individualistic, then probably the law will be lesser. But in any case, you still bind to some laws different with God as the freest agent or being. He is not tied to any law. And that's what being alluded by Schumacher in this. Okay, we talk about freedom, we talk about progression. And okay, now that's about the world. The second is about the man, right? Okay, the second element is about the man or humankind. Okay, before there is, if there is any discussion. All is clear. Hajara, okay. Now, Schumacher introduced this concept of adequatio, which, pardon me, I didn't have the time to investigate, is this a Latinized or Greek or whatever origin is this, but he introduced this concept to denote that there is this element of adequateness, adequatio. This concept of adequateness is important because our capacity, especially our human mind capacity, must have the adequatio to understand something that we want to understand. And we cannot understand something if we don't have the adequateness, the capacity to understand it. Now, he brought the example of if you're giving a book, a literature book, to a person who doesn't understand. Okay, for example, we give Quran in Arabic to a German who doesn't understand Arabic. Okay. So what will the German do? The German, probably after scrutinizing the whole Quran, is able to crack the code between the letters and find the grammar rules that is ruling or that is binding the words together. Probably he could identify that and conclude that, yes, if I am to write another Quran, so this will be it. But does he understand the meaning? He does not. But he is able to understand the laws that bind the letters together. This means that he does not have the adequation, the adequateness to grasp the meaning. What will make him understand the meaning is the capacity of understanding Arabic. That will make him understand the meaning. Now, same goes to our perceive towards this world. And before that, for example, if you give, for example, Mozart symphony to a deaf person, of course, he couldn't appreciate this symphony or this melody composed by Mozart. Okay, so that's one thing about adequation. Another thing is that now, how does this relate to how we understand this world or how we perceive this world? He says, when you are looking at the moon, so this is interesting because this is the exact example given by Al-Ghazali in Al-Munqidh. When you are looking at the moon, you assume it to be small, while in fact we know that it is actually bigger in size. Now, this means that our senses, our eyes, according to Al-Ghazali, our eyes are deceiving because it doesn't give us the true reality of the moon, which is it's bigger, but our eyes show it to be the size of 1 dirham. While in fact, according to Schumacher, it shows that we don't have the adequateness of perceiving the moon. Therefore, we need some assistance, which is telescope. And with the assistance of reason, we can reason with formula the exact size of the moon. So that's how you apply. And of course, if a person doesn't have adequate mental capacity, including the sense from the heart, he will not be able to perceive the true reality of this world because he will only be dependent on the 5 senses. So amazingly, he talked about heart pretty much throughout the book, and emphasizing that in terms of religion and God, we cannot use senses and we cannot depend solely on the reason, but we have to use the organ that has more adequation to perceive religion, which is the heart, or the faith, spirituality. That's why in our context today, for example, if you are doing da'wah, you can convince some people using logics, using arguments, that they are convinced with you. but not necessarily they will make the leap of faith to embrace Islam. You can convince them using metaphors. You can convince them using logics. Probably they will be convinced, but this is at the level of mental. This is the mental faculty. But eventually the one that makes the leap of faith is the heart. And therefore, this is what lacking in the Western civilization and Western discourse on man and the world today, according to the author. Okay. And so, so this is one of the things that we mentioned in the beginning. This is the elements in the map that we have to realize in our perceiving of this world. If we neglect these important elements, then our map will be severely lacking of the true reality of this world. And therefore, thank you. We open to discussion. And please enjoy your coffee. Tea. Have a tea.
So thank you to Hilman, Azman. So alhamdulillah, we have ended our presentation. So now happy to open the floor to any questions, to any sharing. Okay, all of us can benefit together.
Quotation?
Okay, go on. I'm sure many have ideas. too.
Huh?
I'm sure many here have ideas. So we
Okay.
can open up to that.
So the
What's it? What's it?
definition of human according to him is animals that realize it that is
Yeah, being that has self-awareness. Yes.
Can you understand self-awareness again, in what sense?
Hmm?
Self-awareness means what?
Number one, it realized that it exists, and then when it realizes that it exists, it comes with the realization that you has potential.
You mean potential means what?
Potential to express our human capacity. For example, in arts. For
Yeah,
example,
but how does that self-awareness produce that?
when you realize you exist and you are different from animals, and you are capable of doing logics,
So you
And-
see Aristotelian rationale.
in a way, yeah, in a way. But he talks more about how humankind can contribute towards civilization.
So it is beyond its physical needs. Look.
Yeah,
I mean, animals deal with instinct,
right,
and they react, and they deal with basically with physical needs.
right.
But man can actually think of tomorrow, and have actually greater than physical needs.
Correct.
So how do you decide goals?
Hmm?
How do you decide goals? What goal?
Goals.
What is to live?
Ah, what is the purpose of life?
Yes.
That's when
In your Schumacher, how do you decide what's the goal of man?
fortunately he's not with us today, so I couldn't speak on behalf of him. Yeah, but well, knowing he's a Buddhist and following Thomas Aquinas' philosophy, So not very much different from Aristotle. It's about actualizing the potential of human beings. And he lived in the he passed away in 1977. So it's basically it's after the wars, after the revolution. It's about bringing back the Western civilization to its ethical and moral foundations and building civilization based on what characterizes us as human being, which is a being with self-awareness and also the capacity to reason morally. And yeah, so it's an open-ended goal. Um,
Curious, he talks about sacrifices or limitation, limiting. It is very limited. You're not materialistic, you're not individualistic in a way. What motivates you to limit yourself? Instead of taking advantage of everyone else,
mm,
why stop yourself?
That's a very good question. I think,
You have to think of everyone. This
Yeah.
is very egoistic.
yeah,
But how do you prevent yourself from being egoistic as such?
yeah. So he talks about there's a very good example that he gave about us having a pet. Okay, animal pet. So for example, you have a cat, but in the West, they usually have dog. Even in Turkey, they have dog pet in their house, according to Hanafi Mazhab. So now, this pet dog, according to him, why does some human being love to have pets and prefer to be with their pets instead of mingling with society? So according to him, you know, why do you have pet? Because pet doesn't judge you. Your dog or your cat doesn't judge how you look and never betray you.
Unconditional love.
Yeah. And it doesn't stab your back. So if you are into society, you always have this fear of the other having ulterior motives towards you or have their own interest of using you. So this means that you are having pet as a sort of substitute, as a sort of you can say escapism, and also it's not a defense mechanism, but
Calm yourself. Coping.
yeah, to cope with, in fact, it's to cope with your own lack of adequation because you don't have the trust and also confidence to live in society, and you resort to an alternative which is weak and which you know will never betray you, right? So now coming back to Dr. Isham's questions, which I think he's asking all of us, not only me. so which is why some of us would choose not to betray and be truthful to our moral precepts and sacrificing ourselves instead of sacrificing others for our own benefits and interests. So yeah, why?
Actually,
Yes, answer please.
I don't have any.
Huh? Okay. We talk about human and the pet, right? It has the pet because the pet will never betray him or her. So why someone would choose to be truthful in his or her moral precepts, not to betray anyone, not to use anyone, not to, in fact, sacrificing himself or herself for the others instead of doing the opposite. You do the opposite because you have interest, right? You want to fulfill some interest. But why would you do otherwise? In other words, why would you become so good and kind? Why would you do that?
Because religiously obey.
Sorry, what?
Religiously obey.
So you're only doing it because you get heaven,
No, because
or you're afraid of that?
God asked you.
Yeah, but why do you obey?
Simply because love of God.
That's
Not expecting heaven, not expecting ajr, but simply for the sake of obeying God.
That's a little bit here.
No, I already crossed.
This over.
This one is very calculative.
Yeah.
So it's like the tablighi one. If you pray this prayer, you get 10 houses in heaven. You pray this one, you will get how many wives or whatever. This and that. It's very calculative.
Yeah, but you doesn't mention
But you're not talking about calculative.
Yeah, it's just
But you're talking also about calculation. The reward or punishment. But man seems to sacrifice his nature for anyone who has children. Your children mean to you more than yourself. Huh? That's the question I'm asking you. Why are you constrained? This idea that man is narcissistic is only concerned for that's not true.
Yeah.
If not, you would never live in a society or at least never have children.
That's Thomas Hobbes.
Hobbes is very much narcissistic. We are egoistic.
You don't trust human, right?
Huh?
You don't trust human.
No, you act only on behalf of yourself. So the strong dominate the weak. But you find that actually in many cases man sacrifices. The question is why? I mean, you might help your friend without expectation of any reward.
Happiness, yeah. Kita just satisfied by having people.
if it is for religious purpose, is it bad?
Look, I give you the example of the tablighi, right? You ever joined tabligh before? I've joined tabligh before. Long time ago. I regret doing it.
You joined tabligh?
A long time ago when I was very naive.
Young.
Don't regret it.
Well, it made you extremely calculative. The way they did it, of course, tabligh starts in India, and it wanted to encourage Muslims to go back to their religion. They used a very they say, okay, if you pray Nawafil, you get this. You pray this, you get this. You give reward, you get this. So it was extremely calculative. How many houses in heaven, how many this and that. It was extremely materialistic. And today also you seem to calculate your goodness or your harm in terms of very materialistic. Yet, since you talked about Schumacher discusses the idea of beyond the material calculation. So how is it that you are able to constrain yourself? The argument was law does not make man moral. Man has to choose to be moral, not forced to be moral. You force someone to pray, that's not prayer. You have to choose to want to pray. So, why? What's the motivation? I understand the initial motivation, yes. The harm and the avoidance of harm and reward. That's how we teach children how to fast, right? You give them hari raya puasa money, right?
Yes.
But at your age, I don't think we do that anymore lah. So you now no longer need that motivation. So how do you motivate yourself now?
There's an argument of fitrah that we
Yeah,
are
so articulate it.
we are naturally inclined towards good,
Yes.
and therefore to do the otherwise would shatter our height and tranquility that we become discouraged.
Doing good is actually natural. Doing bad is actually unnatural. You regret doing bad things,
Right?
or you feel bad for doing bad things. You never seem to regret doing good things.
Sometimes.
So I mean, no, because you are talking about Schumacher, that's why I bring it up as you talk about the human intention and goals. We are different. That's why a rational animal now realizes that it's beyond physical needs. And they're beyond physical needs, therefore must also go beyond reward and punishment. The action has a good in itself, not just because there is reward or there is punishment. We're not saying there is no reward or no punishment, but it's beyond just that reason why you do. Good for the sake of good in itself. Yes, no? But
Can I give
see
some
the speaker, not me.
in psychology? There is Pavlov, a scholar in psychology, that he ran an experiment with dogs. That what stimuli a bell. He rang the bell. After hearing the bell, the food will come.
Yes, yes.
Then the dog will salivate.
I know that.
After he heard the
Stimuli response.
So there is some thought in psychology that we as a human we need reinforcement and punishment to do something. But there is some school of thought and some modern psychologists who try to encourage people to not rely on reinforcement and punishment.
No, the reinforcement and punishment goes at a very early stage where you are naive. So as when you're young, your parents will punish you for not doing certain things or reward you for doing good. But as you become older, the good is good in itself. You don't need any more reward. Or you should not need, the reward shouldn't be the main goal why you do. No? So, shouldn't be the goal.
Because you feel good to do it.
Yes.
I'm saying that like in the beginning state of like doing good, maybe we are persisting like for the because of the rewards and so on. But after time to time, there are the state that we enjoy doing that without like, oh, I doing this because of I will get this somehow yada yada. But in the one state that we just do it like, for example, like prayer. Maybe in the beginning people feel lazy and so on, but because of the reward, we tend to do that. But after maybe I don't know, maybe it's a little bit subjective. Maybe some people need 5 years to feel the deliciousness in terms of, I mean, doing the goods or the deeds. So maybe in terms of from the Islamic perspective, is as a encouragement towards the people to do goods. But after some level of some states, the person or the ibad will reach to the state or level that he enjoy, he feel the deliciousness of the goods. So doesn't need to like any material things.
It's probably material.
Yeah.
Because when you do something and satisfied with doing kindness, yeah, actually I agree with because we are enjoying doing the kindness actually. Yeah. That's a knowledge because for me, I enjoy doing because yeah, to think about the reward is another part, but actually when we fun doing for kindness, sometimes the benefit to me doesn't think too much. Yeah.
when you say enjoy, does this the same like the ones who enjoy going to water park or probably doing something which
Spiritually.
Spiritual.
is a spiritual fulfillment?
Spiritual.
If we talk about like the prayer or the Islamic base, but in terms of the morality or the good deeds, there might be some like the enjoyment or the deliciousness is a little bit different, but still we can perceive or get the satisfaction from doing that moral
Yeah.
deeds.
And you,
you know, it's really rewarded.
again, you want to
No, because the order is not never well. Because for me, a water is for me. If you're doing
Yeah.
kindness, it's really enjoyable, deliciousness.
Yeah.
It's something different.
Yeah.
It's not only about it's not. It's more than the religion. I mean, like it's our satisfaction. Yeah, satisfaction. Yeah.
For happiness.
Yeah.
Mm.
It can be for happiness. Yeah. It can be for happiness.
Happiness doesn't have to be materialistic.
Yeah, happiness is
Yeah, you all have parents. Your parents sacrifice for you.
Yeah.
There's no reason that they should sacrifice for you.
Yeah.
But they find satisfaction.
Yeah.
Even though it's hardship.
Yeah.
Even though it's hardship. So that humans are not as narcissistic as you think or as capitalistic as you think.
Go on.
For me, sometimes, some reason that why we have to do good, for example, because Rasulullah also asked us to do this, and he told, when you do this, you will get it. It's some of the motivation that make you to do it.
I'm not saying that there is no benefit.
Yeah.
The reward and the punishment is true.
Yeah.
That's not the question. But you don't necessarily only do it for the reward. Okay?
Yeah.
It's not you become like the big.
Yeah.
No, it becomes to a certain extent. When you listen to Tablighi nowadays, they are as materialistic as anyone else. Even more. For this prayer, you get this. For this, you get this. For that, you get that. As if there is no other reason why you do it.
Because we also can see it today, right? The atheist also one of the leading humanists that try to fight for human rights. I mean, they don't have any religion.
Yeah.
So their motivation is not like us.
So, as I said, the argument is, well, yes, we believe in reward and punishment. That's not a question. But that shouldn't be the sole reason why we do things. And we can see human beings actually do things not only in calculative terms. So, the idea of having children is quite common, and having children is sacrifice. A lot of sacrifice. Yet you seem to find great satisfaction in having children. I become a grandfather this time. Last week I became a grandfather. Finally.
I don't think the Taliban, you should mention the Taliban, right? Because, sometimes even previously, if I am diary, every day they will put some habit. If you do this, you will do this. Previously, so then this thing also forwarded in the WhatsApp group.
I know.
Every day, what
I can understand.
also in the public.
You don't know Tabligh the history. That's a different thing. Tabligh history goes to India somewhere in a town with people's names are Muslim, but they don't practice any Islam. So when the first thing when people went to that town, the argument was they were very materialistic. So you tell them about material gain. It's like the Quran. So the arguments in the Quran are very materialistic to a certain extent. Talks about reward. You do this, God will reward you 10 times, 7 times, whatever sacrifice, because they were businessmen. So the incentives are very business oriented, but it's not the goal. Yes.
Betul juga. Tapi we don't talk about the subject only, but the concept itself. Why Rasulullah tell us that
what do you call, how much if you get this. Not we don't talk about the subject.
Ini macam bayar gaji ya.
Tidak.
Bayar ni bayar gaji.
No.
Tak sayang tak bayar gaji.
Not because of that.
No, no.
Sometimes that's because like for example, why different solat nawafil have different darajat of fitness, right? Because of that motivation, not because of that subject. If you do they tell you if you do this, you get it. Because Rasulullah also said, I'm not that subject is right and wrong, but the way that Rasulullah tell us to do, he also tell us how much you get this, how much you get this.
How much is relative lah. Tak boleh. You are not talking about beli barang. You will find that it talks about in general. You will be rewarded multiple times for your effort. But no, if you don't learn from the lesson that the act of doing good is good in itself,
Yeah.
not just for its benefit. You will not be sincere in your action. You will be very materialistic, and that's actually not what we want to promote.
Yeah, can I say something? This is part of the inspirational effort done in the early days, in the beginning of Islam also. For example, like when the Muslim came to make dawah in Sumatra in the early days, they saw that the people there, most of them, they are Hindus. They practice Hinduism. And then the culture is that, you know, they will materialistic lah, you say. So in order to inspire them or to invite them to Islam, they have created some means and ways to attract them. One of the ways is to do some melodious azan, which they like. And they start coming and they, you know, alhamdulillah, after that, after some time, their leaders became Muslim and they follow their leaders also to become Muslim. This is part of what they call it in Arabic, fadilah. The fadilah. So a lot of hadith also talking about fadilah, although some of them is like, you know, less authenticated lah, but to instill the love of actions doing all this is okay. To invite these people to do this.
Okay, thank you very much. I think Dr. Ju, I think your point is about when Doctor addressing the point as if we are being too calculative. I think whenever say the prophet,
Materialistic also.
it's a reward in the hereafter. So, for example, when the prophet mentioned, if you pray Salat Fajar, and then you will, it is better than the world, and it's
Better than the world and everything that
everything is it. But it's actually a sense of a significance of the salah. It's not about focusing on the rewards, right? So there is a qaedah that says al-tahdid, al-adad la yufid al-tahdid. Numbers doesn't mean that it's limited to that. So for example, when you pray Salatul Jama'ah, it says 27 rewards for you. But it doesn't mean 27 as if you're counting every time 27. But what left in your memory is that this Salatul Jama'ah is important. The Prophet will give a different kind of encouragement and rewards. 27 rewards, better than the earth and its everything in it. Suratul Kahfi is between two Jama'ah you will be forgiven. You're not going to remember, but you know it is important and its significance.
Right.
So yeah, so eventually what's left in our memories when reciting the hadith of the Prophet is that we need to do this. I think that's okay. So yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Isham, for sparking the debate and
It's
discussion.
totally different. It becomes something different.
That's okay. So yeah, and then
It's a very fruitful discussion. Yeah.
Maybe you want to ask Azman, please.
oh yes, Facebook.
I don't know, he's watching, he's
Okay. Shazwan, do you have any question? Our brother Shazwan now is now on leave, so we pray that he will. No.
Balkis also, if she wants. Tapi
Actually,
dia dah keluar. Dia
serious. Betul cakap
Penulis.
Okay.
Dia tak dapat hati.
Okay, that's all. Baik for attending today and share all of your opinions. So hopefully you can meet again for our next session. The 27th session, inshallah. Stay tuned in Facebook and YouTube. So I think that's all from us. Thank you so much. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum.